as a safe as a PM. Yeah, I actually started the beginning of the year, February. That's also basically when I got into Web3 blockchain. Obviously, was following it before, but I did work 4 years before that at Dubsmash, which is a social video app. I'm located in Berlin, and yeah, I'm really happy that we're kicking, or that Peter's pushing this initiative. I think all these interviews are really insightful because we have a lot of challenges at Gnosis, and I know I was by reading these interview things, like I was recognizing some of them again. So let's see what the outcome of that is.
Maybe pick someone else.
Drew.
Yeah.
Hey guys. Yeah, I'm the product owner for Pillar project. Been with them for a little over a year after kind of consulting with them part-time initially, and initially getting introduced actually through a design competition, wallet design competition. Was based in London for the last year, just got relocated back to home, LA, and I'll be back and forth, but spent a lot of time out in London. Before that, I actually ran to sister web and mobile application development agencies, primarily based in Los Angeles, but most of our development and design work was outsourced to Uruguay, Argentina. And so, yeah, most of my background comes from that kind of space, certified Scrum Master, all that stuff, or whatever that means. But yeah, I've been in the, I guess, process of product, especially software development, for some time. So, Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Chris. I've been advocating for more project and product management in the space for about 2 years now. Most recently, I helped Aragon release their Alba release to mainnet. So I basically managed that process to get them there. And for going on about a year and a half, I've been a part-time project manager for the Ethereum name service. So I still do work with the Ethereum name service as the project manager there. And other than that, I'm doing more and more consulting in the space because it seems like now's a really good time for project and product managers to become part of teams. And I found consulting to be a nice way to do that, and a nice kind of slow entry point. I think similar to what Drew, or maybe it was Tobias, mentioned, into the different teams and figure out where the right fits are. And other than that, I started a blockchain PM newsletter. It's a free newsletter that I started about a month ago that tries to consolidate all the blockchain PM jobs at different crypto projects and send that out about once a week. And also try and do a small article on top of each one of those, discussing different aspects of what we're all trying to do here. How about, looks like James?
Yep. I'm James Hancock. I live in Berlin. I'm a product manager for a really small project called Tenetgraph. We're building a website to gather signals for Ethereum stakeholders and put them on one place, so everyone can be on the same page about contentious topics in the ecosystem. And I'm new to the Web3 space. Like 5 years ago, I did web application development a little bit. I'm not very good at it. And then I did web application consulting on usability and things like that. And then I'm getting back into it just this last summer. So I'm excited to learn more about the whole the product manager side of it, especially. And then I think we have Chadwick.
Hey everyone, Chadwick Strange here. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Cool, thanks. Just checking my internet connection. I'd love to turn on the video, but I think it would kill my connection. But as an introduction, I've been a product manager developer in many different industries for well over 10 years. Started in pharma, biotech, got really tired of that space and transferred over to software development. Did my MBA at Berkeley Haas right around the time, just before UC Berkeley created their blockchain at Berkeley student group. At that time, it was called the Bitcoin Association of Berkeley. And that's when I kind of fell down the rabbit hole, like everyone else, in terms of reading Ethereum and understanding all the business models, new business models that are created with blockchain systems. But I'm currently a VP of product at a layer 2 scaling solution called Scale Labs. And it's a project we're kind of coming out of stealth mode right now. But before joining Scale, I was sort of consulting for a number of projects. And obviously there was sort of a vacuum in the space for product managers. And when I came across Scale, they were evidently very focused, very customer-centric, focused company. And they wanted a product manager. So I was really excited to see a team that was already looking actively to have a product management role. I just came across this group actually a couple of days ago, so I'm really excited to have this formed. I think product management in this space, there's a lot of differences from traditional software development, and it'd be great to share best practices about how we approach this space. And in talking to some other product managers at some certain conferences, I think there's a lack of discourse, and so it's great to see this is like a beginning to sort of discuss best practices and share ideas and interview people what their challenges are. So thanks.
Yeah, I think essentially last week we really just had a very candid conversation with about the PM role within the space. And I tried to, and one of the initiatives I wanted to carry on was basically interview a bunch of PMs in the space to discover maybe more about the role and the various nuances of it compared to Web 2.0. Now that I feel like we've kind of been exposed to a lot more of the potential conversations that we can have through the chat, as well as, you know, a great understanding of potentially what insights we can actually go after, right? I would potentially like to revisit, you know, like, what do you want to achieve with this group, really? You know, I'm curious to know, you know, what do we want to actually, like, you know, we've been collecting resources. We've been kind of like looking into the insights being produced through the interviews. You know, we have all of this information. How do you want to actually, what outcome do you want to create? You know, I understand that most of us are working on products, and we want to obviously understand how to become better product managers. You know, but alongside that, going more in depth, you know, what are some other kind of objectives? Just curious, you know.
I think for me, one of the things I'm most interested in is continuing to advocate for more product and project managers in the space. So I really feel like we're at a time based on the evolution of Ethereum, particularly, and I think with the recent price drop, I really think it's execution that's going to differentiate between the products that pull through and make it and realize, you know, the promise of decentralization. And so, you know, a lot of the products that may not do that. And I think now, you know, people might be a little bit more receptive to hearing that, more so than before, where, yeah, so I think project owners might be more receptive to hearing that now than before. So to me, it would be, how do we advocate for more product and project managers in the space? And I think that starts by defining, you know, what it is we do and why we do it and how we can help teams and how that help is really help and not unnecessary overhead. So I think if we can help shape the way the space looks at us in a positive light, I think that's one thing that I would hope we could accomplish.
Going into that, just like one question. There's a lot of resources online, like, as we know currently, on like why PMs are needed. Do you think this needs to be, you know, do you think this, in terms of advocacy, this means like, you know, why hasn't there been a great awareness? You know, is it kind of just not knowing, like ignorance, or is it the fact that a lot of this content is not only not a lot of people are aware of, but like it's an educational factor, like, or, you know, or whether, you know, this content hasn't been adapted to Web3. You know, it's not so relevant.
I think reading it from third parties isn't necessarily convincing enough. I think it's easy. I mean, and plus the amount of content out there today is just so overwhelming that I think it's the default is really to dismiss content. You know, I think that's why I think now that we have real people here with real stories and real accomplishments, and we could tell those stories in the context of Web3, that it makes that message much more relevant to the people we'd be talking to. You know, like some of the initial research I did basically said, you know, 98% of open source projects have failed. You know, and I think one of the messages is, you know, I think for people to hear that today who are working really hard on these projects, that's pretty scary. So, you know, effective project and product managers can maybe help reduce that number and increase the chance of a project succeeding. So I think, and especially I think, given attention spans today and time constraints, that throwing a bunch of content at people and expecting them to actually read it, process it, and believe it is a pretty big ask. So I think our ask is to make it easier, more digestible, more believable. And that belief comes from real world examples, I think.
Something that would
Definitely. Also following up on that, I guess I've heard a lot already. Well, if I say like, okay, I'm a product manager, then they ask like, okay, but product manager, like in this space, like what do you even do, right? And I guess that's like Chris already mentioned some of the things that would be great to raise awareness. But then also, I don't believe that it's only like ignorance or something. Also, I'm wondering, and maybe that's something what I want to get out of this is, how do you basically best plug in to like maybe an existing team or existing project, and also what things do product managers here maybe need to do different? Because some kind of like the foundation or some of the things are different, some requirements. I mean, it's really technical, like this kind of like all these security requirements and stuff like this. Like this is all a little bit stronger or maybe even harder than it is in maybe Web 2.0. And also we are just one or several steps in the entire development before, like in Web 2.0, we're basically farther ahead, whereas we start a little bit more beyond. And I think this is a goal for me also, what I want to get out of this.
something that I'd like to see is a path for plugging into existing systems, because it's easy if you come strictly from the tech side and you make like the path into Web3 so far is basically you do the tech and then you get the thing and then you start working, whereas product management sort of comes in at the side at some other point, and it's hard to know how to jump in on a project that already exists and they actually want you. Another part is I feel like there's an allergy towards existing, like previous ways of doing things. Like people want to throw out everything that's ever like, oh, we can't do anything how it's all been done before, and that allergy to that, or that attitude, I think is not really helpful in specifically the product management stuff. And I'm still really new to all of this, so I want to make sure I'm
I think that allergy is a good point. I think that's a good way to describe it.
Web 2 allergy. I've got the hives thinking about it.
One exercise that I think might be helpful for us as a suggestion is maybe developing some sort of product management framework and assess comparisons, compare that to like usual product management frameworks that define what a product manager does or how a product manager might approach a project, and kind of compare that from like Web 2.0 technologies, and then maybe have develop our own framework of how it exists for Web 3 technologies. That might be one interesting exercise for us to go through and work through. I'd really love to see that, and I think putting pen to paper and developing out a framework might kind of solidify these sort of abstract ideas that we're all dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Another exercise that might be good is, this goes along piggybacking around this sort of educational piece that a few of you mentioned before, to develop like maybe a medium publication for like Ethereum-based product developers or blockchain-based product developers, and come out with a series of posts to help educate the market about, you know, what is different with project management in this area, and then maybe deep dive into certain areas like how do you approach project management for security, and that could be also a channel to maybe describe the framework that we develop. But yeah, those are just two ideas just want to throw out there.
In regards to a framework, I think the spectrum of challenges and therefore like required competencies or roles that you'll need to play in a project management position are substantially more vast in like the Web3 space, as a result of both like the bleeding edge of the technology and what's actually feasible to user interests and or lack of interest in particular products. So yeah, I think defining it is going to be really challenging as a result of that as well, specifically, because I know I've done everything from applied research to architectural diagrams to stuff that a normal product manager would rarely probably touch in like the Web2 space, or maybe they'd have insight into but wouldn't be necessarily directing. So I think that's also going to be really dependent on project to project, but in the interest of collecting the information and seeing, I think it'd be fascinating. But I think we're going to see a huge spectrum and variety of required both talents, roles, and it's whatever you kind of is needed to push the project forward. Everything from, on the founder's side or the investor side, ignorance to ego and all those typical challenges and how that plays part. But especially on the point of an ongoing medium series or podcast or some way of disseminating this information, because Chris, I think you made a really important point. Like, although this is really valuable to us in the interest of this not just being a self-help group for PMs and product owners and managers, like kind of counseling themselves, which is great and valuable in and of itself. I think the people who need to hear a lot of the insight we'd have are not us ourselves, but people like founders, people who are looking to get into this space, the average token holder who doesn't understand why it's taken so long to build a wallet and the complications involved in various things. So yeah, it's kind of who is our audience and who is this most valuable for, outside of kind of what we can all get internally as well.
Yeah, I think I like the podcast idea. And Peter does a really nice job moderating these. And I think with some of those interviews you've been having, Peter, if you were able to get people's permission to record them, and that'd be a really nice start.
Agree.
And then I would say also that with the newsletter that I'm sending out, if anybody wants to contribute to it, you're welcome to do that too. While we figure out what else we're going to do. And then I think seeing things from the project owner's perspective, like Drew mentioned there, I think is super important. I think we need to look at it as if, from the outside in, how are we viewed, and, not necessarily what we can do, but why other people are interested in us doing those things. And then finally, coming back to the framework, I think there's a lot of good that can come out of that, because I also think that in our space, or not in the project management world, I think there are a lot of really bad project and product managers who come in and just like through inexperience or need to control or whatever, just come in and try and pull everything to a stop, implement these super heavy frameworks that are more overhead than they're worth. And I think people who have come into contact with that type of person also have maybe even a more severe allergy. So I think also, being clear that, an effective PM can help, but we also recognize that not everybody's an effective PM, and help define what we think, an effective PM would do. would be really helpful too.
I think like a good PM is that much more important in Web3 too. And the demands are a lot more like nuanced as a result. You have to be, again, you have to, the experience as well as kind of the approach have to be even more thoughtful or specific. At least that's what I've kind of found so far.
And I would add flexible to that too.
I think so. I think a good start might be actually defining the various, I guess, the nuances of Web 3.0 PM ship versus 2.0. And then, like you said, there's a vast spectrum of various things that do differ. And I think potentially a way to go about this is through a Figma board, actually. Basically a mind or a mind map of some sorts, something where we can actually kind of workshop and actually map over, what we think the differences are. Like we can actually just begin with whatever goes up the top of our heads, and we can start arranging them into whatever arrangement that makes sense, essentially categorizing later and forming such a framework as we go along. I think I think an overarching theme from like the interviews I've done is that yes, like the role of a PM, like I guess varies massively between various products, but the kind of the variable that changes most dynamics are often like, basically how close, what type of product are you building? Are you building a Zap? Are you building some user facing, or are you building something for developers as middleware? Are you building a protocol itself? And who you're building for, like, essentially the type of product. I think this provides a spectrum from like very low level kind of technologies to something more application layer. And I think such that this, if you look at all the various changes and nuances in product management up and down this, I think it varies the biggest if you would to pick one kind of variable. So any thoughts on that? Because my objective here is essentially, what should we kind of start off with? How can we go about kind of organizing our thoughts, essentially? Yeah.
I love the idea of the mind map. I think there's just a lot of things that we kind of want to talk about, and if you could just get it on one page and then reflect on that and then figure out, do we build a structure from that? Do we tackle one of these certain ideas?
Yeah.
I really like the idea of like a Figma board or a mind map and just get everything on one page from this community here, and then just sort of develop and reflect upon that.
Yeah, it's not normally a career or like a position where like we have a lot of data on ourselves and our roles and what we do. It's a lot of like we're working with data fed to us from our users or the product side to direct action and development. But in terms of like our work specifically and the output of that, so I think capturing that would be really valuable. And I think it's one of those efforts where in doing so, I think these things would become a lot more conscious to us as well in terms of like what those are from a focus standpoint.
I like looking at it in the spectrum level as you put out, Peter, because if you go deeper down into the Web3 space, your time horizon has to be longer about what you're thinking about, because you can't undo decisions as much, or just the ramifications of your decisions are way more. You have to be thinking way further down the line for the deeper you are on the spectrum. Another one is, I just had it in my brain. It'll come back to me. Oh, like looking at as like where you fit in the spectrum, you're also going to have that piece be different.
Yeah, agreed. I guess I I think that might be a really good segue. I think, and the next step, I think, like, you know, we've gathered out thoughts a lot better. We could potentially just start mapping this out on a mind map, like a Figma board. And one thing I might do in terms of creating a tangible outcome, I think, is I think we have enough thoughts in our heads and kind of insights to really begin creating, if not publishing, well thought out, I guess, resources, right? As suggested earlier, potentially I can gather a list of suggestions and just basically, you know, spit out a bunch of titles, you know, potentially outlining what information such articles would be about. And we could just vote on essentially what we want to work on first, or someone might want to pick up certain pieces and, you know, we can maybe run it off there. But I think that's a good way to start, actually, because early now, I think I've been ready to kind of synthesize a lot of the interview insights into maybe more refined thoughts. I created the Figma board here, which everyone can actually jump into right now. But otherwise, I don't really have any too much to really chat about. I mean, this was really just more of a touch point. But anything else anyone else would like to chat about? Otherwise, I'm just gonna. I think this might be something worthwhile doing synchronously, perhaps for now. But otherwise, you know, alongside that, before I jump off there, I did. I think the newsletter that Chris is putting together is going to be really helpful for disseminating this, and I think it's something that we can kind of like share the community and be part of that effort in terms of educating everyone. I think I think the newsletter is going to be an important piece, as along with a Medium publication or even a podcast along with that. And in terms of the video calls, I did get permission to record some of them, and I should be releasing them. I just haven't gone down to uploading them and so on. But I will do that. And yeah, like aside from that, yeah, we're just taking it step by step, I think. But I think it's kind of comes to the point where we should kind of synthesize something, or can do so. But yeah.
Yeah, Chris, it'd be interesting to understand if you have like a variety of topics you've already defined in terms of things you're trying to touch on with the newsletter, or how you're approaching the content dissemination at this point, or that'll be driven by the output of this group possibly, or to understand how we could get involved or collaborate or help push this forward as well there. So.
Yeah, I have no strategy whatsoever. I think that's the clearest way to say it. I basically try and correlate collect the jobs, and then usually I am writing on a topic that I've been thinking about based on my recent experiences. So I seem to have at least a handful of them rattling around in my head. But the idea, I think, is to write something that might be of use to PMs who are looking to get into the space. I think the audience is basically PMs looking to get into the space, or PMs that are within the space. And for the former, it might be, you know, some ideas on what projects that are hiring PMs would be looking for, or, you know, things like, you know, what does differentiate a Web3 PM from a Web2 PM. And then for existing PMs, I think it's just, you know, conversations like we're having here. How can we do a better job at what we're trying to do? What are we trying to do? Those types of things. So yeah, I mean, anything in one of those broad categories would fit. So it's pretty free form right now.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah, perhaps even the first one, maybe it's a general overview one, just like as simple as possible, you know, differences of the distinct differences involved in Web3 PM versus 2.0. And we just put together kind of a community collab, just like we'll put a Google Doc, we'll start writing it, and anyone can jump in and add anything and whatever. and we'll just get that out as the first post, and
Yeah, it doesn't have to be super refined.
Yeah,
I think.
listen, I'm just trying to get thinking about what can get the ball rolling essentially.
So I'm sending it out once a week, and if anybody has any, send them my way. And then I guess the other thing we could do is if we could come up with a place to submit job postings as we find them.
Yeah,
that would be helpful.
And this is just another idea I was thinking about, when it comes to getting more people to want to have project or product managers. And I realize I'm not one of the experts, so I wouldn't be, so take that I would appreciate some feedback on the idea. But it would be nice if there was a place that we could send products or founders who are thinking, do we need one? And then they could actually talk with an individual.
right.
Someone from the community who has experience with it, and then they could have a one-on-one. It wouldn't have to really be that long, but that would be really helpful on getting them to have awareness of if they need it.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the most valuable. This content will be most valuable to, I think, that demographic, those people specifically. Outside of, again, the kind of self-help and for those of us who are trying to better ourselves, understand how they can be more effective, et cetera, or trying to get into the space. But
I feel like that would fit next to job postings, or like a place to have questions for someone who is thinking of things like that.
Yeah, I think that fits into that idea of office hours that we've been kicking around, Peter.
Yeah. So we kind of we kind of just ran off with the concept of office hours, where we basically provide I guess a controlled amount of time, or we give out a free volunteer amount of time, on a volunteering basis, where we help people out with any of the issues essentially relating to product management. And I think I chatted with Yayla about this, and we're thinking of kind of running this with social coding, give social coding as a pilot, they have a bunch of projects under the kind of open source kind of incubation, and it seems like they could need some help. But I think this definitely could be opened up into the wider public. I'm just thinking logistically on the solution and execution side of things, how we should, set this thing up or communicate it. It's like, do we have a magician's thread for it? Do we have whatever? Do we have a blog post? Do we have a website? And so on.
I think it's gonna be hard to remove just the natural or organic conversation which will be some of the best insight from kind of what Telegram provides. Yeah. I think, to Chris's point earlier, I think we just have to be thoughtful about when there's obviously a good point raised or something that people are passionate about, we put it aside and say, there should be specific time dedicated to formulating this as a blog post, whatever it is. I think a blog format or email distribution, I think, will be more valuable long-term than forum postings, but that's just personal opinion. If it's a matter of just capturing it, I think the Ethereum Magician form is perfectly fine. But yeah, I think there's no need to discourage that natural flowing and likely to be more poignant conversation that occurs in Telegram or similar chat. We just have to be cognizant and thoughtful about, this is obviously a passionate point or a very important point to extract out and elaborate on, provide some meat to.
Adding on to that, I guess one thing I did spin up yesterday really quickly was I don't want to add too much overhead to this kind of community thing, but I spun up a Trello board to kind of just visualize what everyone's been doing in the ETHProduct kind of community here. It was really just to help me in the beginning, just to figure out okay, who's doing what, essentially, and it might be not a bad way to keep track of like, topics that need to be done. It's just a more fluid kind of nice way to keep things, I wouldn't mind if like I'm the only one who used it, basically just to, organize my own head. So I'm really bad at remembering things. I need something to look at when I'm working with something. But I've kind of like just tagged various people, which I'm like associated with mentally, For example, Chris, you're not in the Trello board, so I just used you as a label. Same with Yela and other folks. But yeah.
I can say something. You guys hear me, by the way? Yeah, cool. Yeah, I just came from another call, so hey, I'm Frederick. I think an important point to make is that I think it have to like not be overwhelming to people that come in like at a later point or are simply not that active. That I mean, it's fine to have all these tools as long as it's like easy to keep track of things by just checking the like Magician forum or the Telegram channel every now and then, and not feel like you sort of lost out because I think there's already like 5 or something different places that things are. You have the notes thing, and then you have the Trello board, and then there's Magicians, and then there's the Telegram, and there might be something else. I don't know.
Yeah, we definitely want to limit it to what we use. Like for right now, we only use Telegram and the Magicians thread.
Yeah.
And everything can be found in like the Magicians. Like ideally, like I think we should use one thing heavier as much as possible, just to centralize. Like for example, in the Magicians, we just tag the product management ring, and if you click on the category, like you should see everything in the history of this community's kind of threads. And yeah, like it's just with previous communities, we've gone to like 5 different platforms and chats, and it just was stupid.
We'll leave the tool choice up to fearless leader Peter Pan. Feel free to direct.
It's even like just yeah, like even if it's I'm just putting out that if anyone wants to use this as well, cool. But it's just my mental kind of like way of how I look at things. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, go on. Sorry.
I think that is a good point though, because otherwise certain people will gravitate towards one or more tools, and you won't get like a synced view of. So if it's general list notes, maybe like Trello. If it's longer post stuff, forum, like it just needs to be, I guess, thought out and kind of defined, and then everyone can try and consistently follow that pattern.
Yeah, it's almost like you need a hub, but it's hard to actually. It's different, but the hub, it's like the concept of a hub where everything is found and so on is a mental model that you have to repetitively implement and so on in the community over a good amount over a period of time. Essentially, basically, like if you work like BJ Fogg's behavioral models, it's kind of like that cycle. It needs to happen over and over again for that thing to really be imprinted in a community. But so right now it's just been mainly HackMDs and Magicians threads in Telegram. It literally is a huge problem actually, of most communities out there.
Do people have an opinion on what they gravitate towards like most naturally? Because that's probably where we'd want to the tool we'd want to use. Honestly, I know it's a hectic to organize, but I do find myself spending more time on like Telegram than like in mobile-based platform versus not.
It's easier for me to I can see it and respond more dynamically through the Telegram stuff, as opposed to the forums are a little more like lag behind.
Yeah,
because I don't get them immediately like I do the Telegram stuff.
That's fair. Did you know there's a mobile app?
I was doing one thing. I mean, I guess for me, I'll probably do the dissenting voice here. I really don't believe real-time chat's a good way to manage work personally, but I hear the fact that I'm probably in the minority with that. But I guess the one thing, whatever we do among ourselves, I would say would be consistent with whatever we would advocate other teams do too. Because I think, if other teams look at us and see very complicated systems in place about how we're doing things, that could scare them away. So I think what we decide to do would be somewhat of a showcase for what we would be advocating teams who work with people like us would do too. And on that note, I'll contradict myself and say that if other teams see real-time chat being used to manage tasks, they're probably less afraid than if they saw teams trying to do it in other ways, which is a battle I constantly fight but always lose. So, but I would say just that perspective that whatever we do should be a showcase for what we would be advocating, I think would be helpful.
Yeah.
Doesn't it also depend on the size of the team? Because Telegram and stuff, it's nice because it's on mobile, right? And I guess it works well when there's not too many messages. I always feel like lost when there's too many messages, and then the probability that you miss something important basically rises. Whereas, of course, in the forum, same thing could happen. It's just too much. You just don't read it. But there, someone could, I guess, easier link to it or something, or you could just mark it easier as to read later, which is a feature I sometimes miss on Telegram. But yeah, I guess it's a trade-off on both sides.
I think longer stuff makes sense in the forum usually. I checked into the Telegram thing the other day, and it's 160, 100 messages. It's kind of hard to understand what to look at and not. But I think these things are probably gonna sort themselves out, where people gravitate towards.
Did you guys know that Jira is a mobile application as well? So if you guys are a fan of mobile applications, we could, just instead of Trello, we could use that because it is a mobile application. If you're insane enough.
I've been kind of thinking of ways of capturing the Telegram conversations we've had and putting them in a digestible format for later. And I'd be willing to volunteer for figuring that piece out. I'm traveling for the next couple of days, so it probably won't be till next week when I'm finally in a place. I think there'd be a cool way of doing it visually, of having a mind map of the conversation, who is adding who. Because there's a natural start, and then there's kind of a conclusion to a big thread or thought. And so representing that and then putting it on the forum might be a good way, and I can investigate how to do that.
Such an effort would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for volunteering to do that. Cool. So next steps, essentially, I'm going to probably get cracking on maybe mind mapping out the differences of kind of Web 2 and 3. Anyone else who are willing, who's happy to join, feel free. Let's do this, whatever. But it will probably happen regardless of, in terms of research. It's come to a point it will. And we might kind of get started on maybe formulating, the first blog post, which will maybe be a result of this mind mapping. I think that's a nice kind of beginning here. And yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm looking forward to this exercise. So I just signed up on Figma. So I guess the assumption is over the next couple of days, just do it asynchronously, just sort of brain dump in there. Okay. Maybe there's a progress where we just brain dump, and then whenever there's the next call, and then we just start organizing it together.
I think maybe after a certain point of the mind mapping, we might be able to start. I think naturally we'll start seeing patterns, and we'll see categorization come out and play. Maybe some frameworks, like for magicians, Fred for whatever. But I think naturally we might be able to naturally start documenting a lot of it, and segue into maybe our first post together on Medium or whatever. That's just my, let's see how it goes. Let's just put it that way. But yeah.
Figma, I've used Figma just a little bit, but is there a way to create like connections, like links to different text boxes? Like a traditional mind map where you have like a hub, sort of spoke ideas.
Don't think so. To be honest, I'm really incompetent at Figma. I just like use it for like just to move stuff around. Maybe like naturally in terms of associating things with each other, you just put them close to each other.
Fair. Yeah, it can.
That's why check. Yeah, that's why I really prefer Figma as a way of kind of mind mapping, and also as a virtual whiteboard, because with anything else, you're confined to the rigidity of how the information is formatted, and you can't exactly make you can't just visualize a mental kind of, I guess, associations of certain things. Like you can make text bolder, you can make text bigger, the font bigger, different font if you want to go for it, but you can change color. You can create boxes, you can create arrows, like you can do what the fuck you want with it. And what we want to create is essentially, don't worry about creating chaos. It's about getting as much out there as possible for now.
Awesome. I follow you.
Awesome.
Peter comes from a
strong also link things with like when you're prototyping in Figma, you link pages or screens.
Yeah.
So you could do those links, and they will sort of organize neatly. If you drag things around, they will follow and whatnot. It's not what they're intended for, but I think it would work for like a mind map thing.
Yeah, my favorite way to do that is to create a box, a rectangle, have add borders to it. It's like the black kind of rectangle, and just fit it behind or over some text, and it kind of like adds more visual like clarity and structure to your content, despite how messy it is. It's like Tobias's thoughts, or my thoughts. It's like stuff like that. If you want to segment it off, but yeah.
A tool that does have, you can make whatever and then connect whatever and still is really flexible. Like I've used Google Drawings a lot, and those are also collaborable. Like you can connect arrows to arrows, or you can make text boxes, or you can put an image, or you could. It kind of has a lot of the bonuses. So that might be something when you're trying to do that aspect of connecting and having to do all of that, might be something to do there. And I could work on transitioning the document to that if that's what people would like.
Yeah, maybe let's see what the result of the initial mind map is, because it could be like some nice media. If we do decide to move forward on like a blog post, to use that as sort of like a media of like capturing our thoughts, and if it organizes naturally into a nice structure, then that would be good. If not, then we can explore the other option, which you just mentioned, James, using Google Drawings.
Yeah, let's see how this goes, and if it fucks up, like it doesn't work out well, we'll know.
We may just want to screenshot as we go too, because the evolution of our thoughts may be the most interesting.
Yeah, iterations. Yeah. No, I like this. I'm looking forward to this.
Sounds good.
Well, Peter, thanks for organizing this, man. I think there's a lot of good value to be derived, and it's nice to put some faces to names and connect with all you as well.
Pleasure. Cool. If no one, okay, cool. We'll end the call here. Thank you, everyone, for attending. It's been cool chatting.
Yeah, likewise. This is great. Nice to meet you all.
Likewise. Thank you. See you.